That's exactly right. So it is, to me, it is an art form, and the water is the medium, whereas another artist might use clay or
Hmm.
canvas or whatever. The water is something that you learn to manipulate and use to your benefit, and it creates a movement, something
Right.
you can see. You
Hmm.
can see a change in the water, and when I see that change, I'm happy the way an artist would be happy. And the game of racing is something different. That's comes from your emotional side. And typically people get psyched up to race and those
Right.
kinds of things, but there's a game in that. So that's the reason for the title.
Welcome to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by my man, Audley Stephenson, the Odd Man.
Greetings and salutations. Welcome to the Audacious Living Podcast, where our mission is to empower you to live your best audacious life ever. I'm totally thrilled to have you join us on the program today, and appreciate you taking time out of your day to be with us. Now, we're going to dive into inspiring stories and insightful conversations, and are designed to help you embrace boldness and live fully. And I am not joking when I said dive, and you'll find out in a moment. Now, so on the topic of swimming, right? So imagine swimming as a delicate dance with the water, where the mind is the choreographer, and just as a dancer must trust their movements, swimmers must master the mental game to synchronize their body with the water. Dudley Duncan emphasizes focusing on the process rather than the outcome, a lesson that's crucial for both athletes and as well as coaches. Dudley is a seasoned swimming coach with over 51 years of experience. Having worked closely with Team USA, Dudley has dedicated his career to developing young athletes in club swimming, guiding them from childhood through significant stages of growth and competition. In this episode, Dudley shares his invaluable insights into coaching, focusing on the mental aspects of swimming and the evolution of coaching styles throughout the years. His experience and passion make him a crucial voice in understanding the intersection of psychology and performance. It's a great conversation I'm certain you're going to appreciate. So without any further ado, let's jump into our chat with Dudley. Let's go. Hey, Dudley, thank you for joining me here today on the Audacious Living Podcast. I really appreciate your time to do this today.
Yeah, it's great to be with you. Look forward to our conversation.
Yeah, I was really excited. As I said just before we press record here, I was really excited when, leading up to the interview, and obviously maybe I was saying maybe the Olympics hangover is still going on, and knowing you spent a lot of time with Team USA and the swim team and the club rather, and you certainly could have some insights, but maybe kind of as a starting point, because we got your book, The Art of Swimming, we want to get to as well, so people know about that. But maybe as a starting point, if you wouldn't mind just sort of filling our audience in a little bit about what you, the work you do, and what's brought you up until this point.
So, my career was as a club swimming coach,
Mhm.
and club swimming is unique from all the others, college swimming or high school swimming, YMCA, summer swimming. All those are different in that they're seasonal,
Mhm.
but club swimming is year round, and it involves athletes or swimmers who are age 7 or 8 up to 18. So it's year round, and you're with these kids for as much as a decade of time. So
Mm.
the changes in human growth and development through those years are pretty significant. Likewise, the training circumstances mimic the meet competitions. So typically meets are a minimum of 2.5 to 3 days,
Yep.
and as much as 8 days at Olympic trials. So yeah, it's unique, and that's what I did for 51 years.
Oh, wow. Long and storied career, my friend. That's awesome.
Thanks.
Was it one of those things that you were just drawn to, or how did you end up in a career of spanning, 51 years?
Yeah, that's I did swim
Yeah.
as one of four sports that I did. when I was coming along, you didn't specialize very much. So, it was one of the sports. And then I did coach a summer after high school. And then I got drafted. So I went in the service, and my last year in the service, I was moved from Panama back to Pope Air Force Base in the state.
Hmm.
And they changed my career field from radio operations to security police.
Okay.
So I was investigating a vandalism at a colonel's house. He had 5 kids that swam on the Fort Bragg Aqua Dragon club team.
Mhm.
Fort Bragg and Pope worked together to move troops in and out. So they needed an assistant coach right when I was there. So I raised my hand, said I can do that. That colonel moved me over to Army Special Services. So that's what I did my last year in the service. So I knew I wanted to coach.
Mhm.
I wasn't sure if it would be wrestling or swimming, because wrestling was the sport I preferred in high school and that.
Right.
But when I started student teaching at the end of college, then I recognized that I really didn't enjoy that much. So I
Hmm.
wasn't going to be in the school and be a wrestling coach. And I was already coaching club swimming throughout college. So I just kept doing it from then
Got
on.
you. Got you. Got you. Out of curiosity, I know coaching is coaching, but does it vary like between swimming coach and say other sports? Are there any sort of uniquenesses or things that make it different?
First one is that swimming is counterintuitive to human instinct.
Okay.
So, whereas your human instinct would be to lift your head up to get air
Yes.
and to pull on the water, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So, your instinct is to pull along, but for really good swimming, the head should be in line with the spine.
Hmm.
Your hips are the main thing, which is true in other sports too. But um, for example, in freestyle, you're trying to time the top hip to move with the arm that's reaching
Gotcha.
forward to create a line that's as long as possible in the water.
Right.
So it's the opposite from pulling on the other side. It's similar to kayaking, actually. If you kayak, um, you simply place the oar into the water and have it secure a catch on the water, if you will, and push the other side. It
Hmm.
gives you power by using the hips on the other side and pushing that oar.
Right. Right.
And the oar that's in the water is simply holding the water that it has behind
Mhm.
it. So yeah, it's similar to that. You're holding on to a section of water while you rotate the hip and reach on the other side. Counterintuitive. Nobody does that by instinct.
Right. So time has to be spent maybe like a little bit like de-learning what you instinctively want to do, and then retraining, if you will, the technique that'll give you the most effective.
True. And it's also true that it's a daily reinforcement,
Ah,
because if you're left to your instincts and are not reinforced, to do the right thing, you'll go back to your instincts. Maybe
very good
not in
point.
total, but to
Right.
some degree. So that's um, that's why coaching swimming is a good job, because you're able to continue your work
Right,
every
right. I
day's
get it.
done.
I get it. I get it. Well. The point on reinforcement is a really good one, Dudley, and I'm glad you referenced that because, um, we oftentimes attribute training as just a way of getting better, and it absolutely is. I'm not suggesting that it's not, but there's another aspect that you just suggested that I think is an important one too. That because we instinctively want to operate, move our bodies in a certain way, we need that reinforcement. Say, no, no, let's go back to the counterintuitive, uncomfortable thing because that's how it should be to be most effective.
That's right. There's some some principles of physics that are key. So a longer vessel is faster than a shorter vessel.
Mm,
You're always trying to establish balance on the water, which is to create a movement into the water rather than pulling out of the water.
right.
So, your balance points surround the lungs because that's where your air is.
Yep.
So you can press into the water and leverage the lower body up as you press in. There is feel for the water, and it is true that for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction.
Right.
So you're trying to create all these things with timing, and timing is a matter of having the hips in the right place at the right time.
Got
So
you.
there you go.
Got you. Got
You're
you.
a great swimmer now.
And there we go. I'm gone. I gotta go take a plunge now. So be back in a second. No, very curious, and I want to sort of on the sort of stay on this coaching piece, but more around the philosophy. I recognize that not every coach has the exact same philosophy and how they approach things with with the people they're coaching. I'm wondering for you specifically, Dudley, was there sort of a pivotal moment or an instance that kind of helped shape what your philosophy looks like?
Well, yes. So when I went back to college after being in the Air Force, I was a physical education major, and I had kinesiology courses and exercise physiology. So those two things really set me on a pathway because typically coaches at that time didn't really educate in those areas. They mostly, if they were swimmers before they started coaching after their swimming career, and they
Hmm.
did what their coaches told them to do and moved on from there. But I really based my philosophy and my approach to swimming based on my education.
Very scientific approach there, Dudley. I love it.
Yeah. And that's why those principles of physics are within my dialogue, I guess, about swimming, because I learned those things and apply them.
That must, I can imagine as you're sort of explaining that to your swimmers, and they're like, physics, what are you talking about here? Let's just swim, right?
Yeah, they don't get that word physics that much. I more tell them to do the opposite from what their instincts are.
Hmm.
So, and we do go through that conversation and talk about how to create, power and length and balance and those
Got you.
things with swimmers, but I'm not usually telling them that they're concepts in physics.
Understood. Understood. And is that why you refer to as the art of swimming? It's very much an art, as you're describing.
That's exactly right. So it is, to me, it is an art form, and the water is the medium, whereas another artist might use clay or
Hmm.
canvas or whatever. The water is something that you learn to manipulate and use to your benefit, and it creates a movement, something
Right.
you can see. You
Hmm.
can see a change in the water, and when I see that change, I'm happy the way an artist would be happy, and the game of racing is something different. That's comes from your emotional side. And typically people get psyched up to race and those
Right.
kinds of things, but there's a game in that. So that's the reason for the title.
I love it. I love it. So in your book, I guess you spend a lot of time providing instruction to coaches and certain philosophies that you share. I'm wondering, are there any sort of foundational sort of elements of coaching that every kind of coach should be incorporating when they're training swimmers?
Yeah, well, I think the thing that keeps coming to coaching from my perspective was the mental game.
Mm,
And I think that to kind of draw it into a more concise thought is that it's really more important to be focused on the process than it is on the result.
mm,
And to the extent that you focus on the result in a competition, then it tends to create some nervousness that
right.
can actually develop into anxiety or even fear, and depending on the pressure of the meet. But if you stay focused on the process and you know what you want to do and how you've practiced to be able to do those things, and let the result fall out as it will, then it tends to take away those things. So the anxiety and that, so it's
Right.
really an important reinforcement also to try to get the mental game exactly where you want it.
Mm. That's an important one to ask. It's funny, again, especially in sports, and it applies to all sports. I would say is that people get so absorbed with the mechanics and all the physical attributes to make sure that I can hit the ball far enough or catch it or run or whatever it is that your competition sport of competition is. But that mental aspect remains constant in all of that. You need to have a certain sort of fortitude of mental toughness to be effective.
If you practice what you intend to do,
Hmm.
I have a chapter in the book called The Mental Game,
Yep.
and it starts off with a quote from Stephen Covey, says, "Begin with the end in mind."
Mm.
And that's really important. Once you have the end in mind, then you start back and work out an action plan to get there. So as long as you stay according to your planning and
Yep.
focus on the process, then it's more likely to happen in the end. I have a story along those lines. It never ends either, no matter what level you are when you
Sure.
start or when you end. And one of the swimmers that I had that made the Olympic team in 2000, um, she was second in the 200-meter free.
Hmm.
And I talked to her after the race, and I go, "What does it feel like? Were you nervous? Are you elated? What was it for you while you were up there?" And she goes, "I've had this swim in my mind for a year at least." She goes, "I knew exactly how I wanted to swim,
I
and it
love it.
played out exactly like I intended it to in the prelims, in the semifinals, and the finals. No problem. I was never nervous." She goes, "To be honest with you, I wasn't even that happy for myself because I had teammates that made the team, and I was more happy for them than I was for me. I knew if I swam the way I wanted to swim, I might
Yes.
make it. If I did, that was good. And if I didn't, that was okay too, as long as I did it the way I wanted." Then she made the Olympic team, and it
Hmm.
was a few weeks, I guess about 5 or 6 weeks before the Olympics, which was in Australia.
Hmm.
And she didn't swim as well there. And she was describing that. She called me afterward, and I go, "What happened in this one?" She goes, "Okay. So, I told you about Olympic trials and I had it in my mind. I
Yep.
knew
Yep.
exactly what I was going to do. Well, when I got to Australia and I walked out for the semifinals, I realized that during the whole time since I made the Olympic team, I was like, all around heroes that I'd worshiped all my childhood, and that
Right.
we were
Right.
getting uniforms and traveling place to place. And in practice, I had new coaches and everything." She goes, "It was, I never thought about my event, not even once." And then I walked out, and they're announcing my name, and I'm taking my uniform off, and I realized, "Oh my God, what am I going to do?" And she said,
Wow.
"I was more tired before I ever stepped on the blocks for that event than I
Yep.
was during the whole Olympic trials."
Mm.
And it worked out like that too. She said I was dead about 75 meters in,
Wow.
but it was a great
Wow.
experience. So she liked that.
Well, yeah, and I think that story really illustrates. I mean, the distractions are a big one. That taking that time to focus, as well as the rest. And as you heard from her, she was quite tired too. So I think there's some important lessons that we can take for ourselves, especially when you. So hearing the experiences that during the trials and being able to visualize and seeing where you want to be and plotting out your course and plotting it all out. The success comes from that because there's a process, as you talked about earlier, the importance of the process. And so I think that's a really, really powerful lesson. I'm curious a little bit about sort of the process of identifying or nurturing talent in swimmers, like or potential swimmers rather. Are there particular qualities or attributes that you're looking for?
Well, typically swimmers are made a certain way.
Okay.
So that's probably the first thing you look at. You're able to see whether a swimmer is going to be, is tall for their age, or they have big hands or big feet, or
Hmm.
they have a a wide wingspan, those
Yeah.
kinds of things. You see that. And for example, the Chinese have a spreadsheet, where they're looking for a specific thing in an athlete. And if they don't fit that model, they are not able to make their national training teams,
Mm.
you know. But aside from that, too, you're also um, realizing if a swimmer is, taking to the techniques that you're teaching,
Mhm.
um, is competitive. They really they want to try to get to the wall first, or as best they can. They finish hard, those kinds of things. So there's that sort of physical side, and then the spiritual or the emotional side of, you know is competition natural to you? Do you have a spirit for it? So you're looking for those things. I coached a couple of times in China, and
Mhm.
I was interested in this one experience I had there, where a boy who was the fastest boy in this tryout camp that we were coaching in, and he had all the best times by far. He was really a good swimmer, but his predicted height was like 5'9", I think, or 5'10", something around there, 5 feet 10 inches.
Mhm.
And the girl that was the leader of the camp said, told the staff, "I'm not going to take this boy. I'm going to remove him from the camp." And we're all going like, "Why? That doesn't make sense." And she said, "He doesn't meet the predicted height that we
Gotcha.
were mandated for." And so I talked to her. I go, "It seems to me that you're missing the emotional side and the mental side of how competitive they can be." And she goes, "Dudley, it's different here than it is in the United States. In the United States, you have all of these swimming pools and all of these swimmers swimming all over the place.
Right.
And it's like a big survival of the fittest tank, collectively. But here it's not like that. We have certain people that do certain things, and we have a model." And she goes, "If I take this boy, then I'll be fired from my position.
Mm.
And if I take him and I didn't get fired, he'd be removed anyway because he won't meet the predicted height." So
Gotcha.
it's an interesting question. Depends
It
on
is.
where you are.
Right. Yeah, no, I can see that. And certainly the level of dedication, seriousness too, like to the art of swimming. Um which is fascinating. Uh I'm just sort of thinking back on the story you shared, with your swimmer, and how important she stressed the mental aspect of preparation and getting ready. As a coach, how do you support that, and how do you help them sort of with that preparation process?
With our teams, I tended to do a fair amount of visualization with
Ah.
them, where they would get into a relaxed, quiet state. And I would talk them through races or time, that the race might be. And she was accustomed to that even growing up. And she
Hmm.
was with me from 8 years old to 18. And so she continued with that. She went to Auburn University, and they had a good tradition of developing Olympic athletes there. So she got into that environment, and
Mhm.
the coach there did that as well. So she was well prepared for that going into the Olympic trials. It was her
Right.
senior year of college when she
Mhm.
made the team. So yeah, and then they didn't do too much of that for those athletes. I think that their expectation was if they did that, they could do it on their own,
Right.
at that level. But yeah, it actually didn't happen though.
Hmm.
So, yep,
What
interesting.
what yeah, yeah, what made you decide to write the book The Art of Swimming?
Well, the first thing was, as I mentioned to you, club swimming is just different. So it's kind of pointed. It's my story, but it's pointed at club coaching in particular. There's
Mhm.
always a debate in competitive swimming about, should you do more, should you do less, should you have more speed, should you focus on endurance, how
Right.
much strength training is needed. those kinds of things. So I wanted to address those issues from a club coach standpoint because I've always felt like oftentimes the science of athletic training is
Mhm.
not specific to club coaching.
Got you.
Um, Wrestling is similar in what you have to do in the competition situation because typically it's uh, a situation where you're kind of weeding people out through matches until you get to the last two. You know, you'll have you know days of competition, and it's very
Right.
hard.
Right.
And swimming, club swimming is that way too. You have prelims in the morning and finals in the afternoon or evening, and not much time in between. You're typically swimming 3 events a day plus relays. You have warm ups and swim downs going on constantly. So your yardage, you might be swimming the 50 one day and the mile the next day. So,
Mm, mm.
the challenges are different. They say that the best time to develop an aerobic capacity in an athlete is between the years of about 14 and 17. So you have that factor for club coaches because you're working with kids at those ages. And all of that put together, I think the science of swimming sometimes is not pertinent to specifically to club coaches. Um, and then the second thing is the ages that you have them and the different stages that they're going through psychologically, emotionally, and
Right.
physically.
Hmm.
And then the last thing is that typically these clubs are run by board of directors that are typically maybe 9 to 13 people, usually an odd number.
Okay.
And
Is that for voting reasons? Or is that so they'll
yeah,
tie
for
votes?
voting. Yes, exactly. And they're typically parents of swimmers, so they're
Okay.
not professionals in the sport, but they do have control over the team.
Hmm.
And I've talked to so many coaches and I've said myself so many times, I think if I could own my own pool, and have this business as my own, I could do this a lot better than
Right.
being subject to this board of directors um, paradigm. And it's not that the board of directors they're good people. They're really dedicated and hardworking and open to many things. But in the end, there comes a time where you're kind of up against them sometimes.
Gotcha.
And so I had the opportunity eventually to buy my own pool. And I bought the pool.
Okay.
Wasn't hard to do. Most coaches think you can't do it because it's too expensive to buy a pool and property and all that and run it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's I had a situation that allowed me to do it, and then I ran the business for 20 years
Yeah. Mhm.
and on my own, and it was much more rewarding for me, even though the work was quite hard.
Sure.
Um, I really liked it a lot better. So I wanted to share that with club coaches as well.
Yes.
If
Yes.
I bought the pool for $225,000 mortgage,
Hmm.
and I assumed the mortgage, so I didn't have any money down. I just started paying the payments. It was what a typical, 3 bedroom rancher house would have cost or did cost in the place where I lived at the time. If I'd have done that when I was 30,
Yeah.
which I could have done the same thing,
Hmm.
that would have cost me $50,000.
Wow.
Yeah. And then I would have had a total career where I could have controlled my own destiny.
Sure.
Um, Admittedly, I wasn't much of a businessman at that time, but I could have handled it, I do believe, because I wasn't that much of a businessman when I bought it anyway. So
Right.
that was the other thing that I wanted to share in the book, and it's in there.
Lessons learned. Absolutely. I think there's much value in taking your experience that you've gone through and helping someone else because you're shortening their learning curve. That's for sure. And I'm sure there's great appreciation in that. One of the things that I noticed is that you talk about the importance of ownership in coaching. I wonder if you could sort of explain or elaborate on that a bit.
So I guess a lot of people really who, if you're inclined to be a small business person,
Hmm.
then you like to control your own destiny and you realize that there will probably be mistakes that you make along the way and you'll
Right.
have to be accountable to those to yourself. And likewise, there are successes that happen along the way that elate you, really enthuse you, So um, that was the thing from a standpoint of ownership that motivated me. So it's a good example. I went to military school and while I was in high school, and then I went into the Air Force for 4 years.
Yep.
And there was some time during those years where I cleaned bathrooms a fair amount, and uh, be scrubbing the floors and the toilets and
Mm.
everything,
Yep.
And I always, I didn't really want to do it, and sometimes I would think, well, oh gosh, I'm a victim, it's not fair. I shouldn't have to do this, or
Sure,
whatever.
sure, sure.
And I'm not making any money for it.
Yep.
So, but the funny thing is, though, when I owned my own business, I cleaned the bathrooms all the time and didn't think twice about it.
Yeah.
And, it's fine with me. That's something I had to do.
Yeah.
So I think that really illustrates how it's different.
Uh, what advice would you give to new coaches? They're just getting in. I'm sure your book probably has some insights, but just quickly, what would you new coaches getting in? What would you let them know or want them to know?
Uh, Number one, believe in yourself.
Mm.
No matter how the kids are swimming at a meet, or you might be watching other coaches and want to do what they do, or you know, not be sure of yourself. Uh, and the other is to be without fear, to just plow ahead and go ahead and believe in yourself. And 9 times out of 10, if what you're thinking is logical in your own mind,
Yep.
it's probably going to work out. It probably is logical, And I think that all of us make mistakes, and sometimes those mistakes that you make really hit you hard because they involve somebody else. So a
Right.
mistake that you might make might cause a swimmer not to have the best
Mm.
swim that they could
Great
have, and
point.
that you feel it inside for them as well as you.
Right.
But inevitably, over a lifetime, it's just like anything else. If you play a sport, you can't go into the competition with doubt in your mind.
Right.
You have to go into the competition believing that the way you've prepared is going to be to your benefit and you're going to compete well. So, yeah, that would be my advice.
I certainly love the insights, Dudley. And I gotta tell you, I mean, it's 5 decades plus that you've been in the you've been in the coaching and swimming space. What keeps the passion going for you? I mean, look, it's only natural that over life you're doing something a period of time and you either get tired of it, you want to move on, or you want to change. The fact that you've written a book speaks to the passion that you have. You want to help young coaches and young swimmers. How do you keep it going?
Well, that's a really good question, actually. And I think when I was younger, before I was 30 years old, so I've been coaching since 1968. Um, I, I, uh, I had times where was like doing other things. So like I said, I went to college for a couple of years and
Hmm.
then I didn't do so well, didn't know what I wanted to be or anything,
Right.
wasn't sure. Majored in, changed my major 2 or 3 times in those 2 years. And then I got drafted because I didn't do that well in school. So I got drafted and went in the Air Force for 4 years.
Hmm.
So I come out and then I needed a year in community college to get my grades up so
Right.
I could get into a 4 year. Then I got into that. So I had some age on me and I had been kind of coaching all along the way here and there.
Hmm.
And so my passion was high then. I would say that my personality on deck for competition was pretty animated, probably. That's how I think I would probably be described in those years.
Right. Right.
When I got to 30, And between 30 and 40, I got married and had a family, and
Hmm.
I started needing to make some money, And in those first years, I thought, gosh, I can't believe they're paying me to do this. It's awesome.
Right. Right.
But later I go, they need to pay me to do this. I can't afford to live with my
Right.
family. So it
Right.
kind of shifts. And at the same time, you're learning more all the time. You're
Gotcha.
experiencing different swimmers, you're learning. So you start to be less animated and more studious, watching the swimmers, watching what's happening, learning from the experiences you're having. And by the end, I think that I would be described as more stoic,
Mm.
on the deck, because I'd be studying the technique that they're using, the flow of their movement, the race that's going on, and the time factor that's happening,
Yes.
a lot of things going on, and trying to rule out distractions and that. So in the end, it wasn't passion anymore. It was something that I did and something I wanted to do well.
Gotcha.
And when I was done, I actually, so I had a stroke in 2015 and I had
Mm.
back surgery in 2017. And I was between 65 and 70 years old then. So my body was starting to tell me, you probably should start taking care of yourself a little
Right.
different.
Hmm.
So I retired when I was 70, and I think that that was right on time. I just didn't need to be coaching longer for my own health and that.
Sure. Sure. Sure.
I also have, I sold the business.
Right. Right.
So I
Right.
had a guy that swam for me from 12 years old on.
Oh man.
He started coaching afterwards and came back to own at my club. And the other guy worked with me from 2004 until
No, that's
2019.
beautiful.
So the two of them have the ownership of it now, 50-50.
Wow, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. And I also very much appreciate hearing how your passion evolved too, right? And I think that's and thank you for sharing how that process, because we don't always recognize that it moves from the passionate thing that we love doing to a necessity for our existence. For example, we need to take a business out and support our families, and so that's awesome. As you sort of look ahead to the future, are there any sort of, just wondering, sort of the swimming, the club swimming landscape as a whole, are there any sort of hopes or that you want to see maybe for coaches and swimmers?
I think from the science of it all, I would like to see that there could be some resolution on the debate that
Okay.
I talked about earlier as to
Yeah.
what you should do. It's still going on, just like it was when I actually. So it changed a bit in 1988. USA Swimming changed from the AAU to its own governing body and moved from somewhere in the Midwest. I forgot even where it was, in Chicago maybe, to Colorado Springs. And they opened up a scientific department of swimming when they
Okay.
did that. And so that's when the science really started to get in a big way, and the debate started to happen in a big way.
Hmm.
And more coaches actually were being educated too, more specifically. And so, yeah, that's been going on. You had the East Germans were doing the steroids during the 70s and early 80s.
Right.
And then that kind of went away a little bit. And then the next thing that came up were the tech suits and the full body suits that were more
Yes.
buoyant and everything.
Yes.
And that
Yes.
affected the debate more. So, now there's professional swimming now, so swimmers are getting paid. They're a lot
Mm.
older,
Yep.
so their training needs are completely different from the high school age kid. So that's still going on. I'd like to see
Gotcha.
resolution to that.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Well, I certainly do appreciate the insights. Again, the book for listeners is the art of swimming and the game of racing: reflections of the USA club swimming coach. I got it all in one mouthful. That's awesome. Thank you for
Well done.
thank you. Um, We're going to make sure that it's on. We know it's on Amazon, and we'll also make sure a link to your websites also there for people who want to learn more about you or connect with the book directly. Any sort of final takeaways there, Dudley, before we go that maybe you want or you want to leave with our audience?
Site is dudleyduncan.com. DUDLEYDUNCAN.com. And there's a fair amount of things that I've been doing, especially since retirement. But also, if you want to get a book from Amazon, it's a little bit less, but it's not autographed either. So if you go to the website and purchase a book there, then I'll inscribe it and sign it and that.
Wonderful. Dudley, this has been awesome. Thank you so much. Congratulations on the book and certain reflections of your experiences. I said earlier, there's so much you can people can learn from your our own experiences and sharing our lessons learned and our perspectives. And you've done a fabulous job of doing so. And so again, congratulations. Appreciate the time and all the best.
Thank you. And I appreciate it as well. And I think your questions were excellent. They really provided some good insight for people into at least this sport and coaching it and doing the business.
For sure. Well, thank you so much. You helped a big deal. I appreciate that.
Great. Best wishes to you.
Back we are here on the podcast, and in our conversation with Dudley, we uncovered the profound impact of focusing on the process rather than just the outcome in swimming. Dudley advises new coaches to cultivate belief and fearlessness, emphasizing that the mental game is as crucial as physical training. By reinforcing the right techniques daily and understanding the physics behind swimming, athletes can break free from the instinctual limitations and achieve excellence. To connect with Dudley directly, please find his contact details in the show notes below. He's certainly eager to share more of his expertise and engage with our community. Of course, his book, we talked about it, he's offering exclusive access, The Art of Swimming, which dives deeper into coaching philosophies. Check out the show notes as well for special offers available to our listeners. I want to thank you for tuning in to the Audacious Living Podcast. If you've enjoyed today's episode, please like, follow, subscribe, or share for others, really. And that's how we benefit and grow this podcast. Your support means the world, and I thank you in advance. Until next time, stay safe, be kind, show love to one another, and be audacious.
You've been listening to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by Audley Stephenson. If you enjoyed what you heard, be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Until next time, be audacious.